I'm curious about what brought you, before we dig into the 1619 Project. You've obviously been writing about race and the history of race in America and where race bumps up against education and class and in every which way. Why?
I was definitely a nerdy child, and I came from a household where my father always subscribed to two newspapers. We got our city paper and our state paper, and I was an avid newspaper reader from a young age. And also having grown up in a mixed race family, having been bused to white schools starting in the second grade, there was never, I can't remember a time where I wasn't aware of race and racial inequality and seeing really stark disparities even within my own family, within my own neighborhood, and within my own city through the school bus window as I was leaving my black side of town to go to a white school because my parents thought I would get a better education. So I was raised thinking about this and talking about these issues. And I got my first letter to the editor published when I was about 11 years old in 1988. And it was a letter about the Jesse Jackson's presidential campaign, his primary run, and he had done very poorly in my hometown. And I was making an argument that we should give this black man a chance because I felt racism played a role. And one day a black man would be president. So I think that helps you understand that in some ways this was destined. I long understood the power of media to shape narratives, and that media was often shaping narratives about my community that didn't reflect the reality of what I saw every single day. In high school, where I was bused, my one and only Black studies teacher, I complained to him one day about how our high school newspaper never wrote about kids like me. And he told me, if you don't like it, join the paper and write those stories yourself, or shut up and don't come in here and complain to me about it anymore. So being an Aries, if you give me a challenge, I always take it up. But I think it was at that moment that I really began to think about myself as a journalist and the power of not just being a journalist who happens to be Black, but that I would be a journalist who is going to write about the Black experience. I mean, I think everyone who is watching this today knows that slavery has largely been treated as an asterisk to the American story. We hear almost nothing about slavery at the period of the Revolution, even though 1/5 of the population was enslaved at the Revolution, even though the architects of our society were all enslavers. They made their wealth and got their power from being enslavers. We tend to be taught that the heart of the American Revolution was Boston, and yet the drafter of the Declaration was a Virginian and an enslaver. The father of the Constitution was a Virginian enslaver. The first president was a Virginia enslaver. 10 of the first 12 presidents were enslavers. But we're not taught history that way. We learn about slavery usually because we have to explain that the Civil War occurred. And then Black people disappear from the narrative until Dr. King has his March on Washington. So, of course, we know that we are a country that practiced slavery, but we are taught that slavery was marginal. And that's just not true. So, yeah, there's no way that you make the arguments that we made that, and particularly taking on kind of the pillars of American exceptionalism, democracy, arguing we didn't actually have democracy until Black people fought to make it one, capitalism, considered the greatest economic system in the world by many Americans, particularly conservative Americans. And we're saying, yeah, it was built on human bondage, at least in the United States. So we expect a controversy. Did I expect, 15 months after publication that the relentless right-wing campaign against the project would still be going on, that the president would issue an executive order against the project, that I literally, can't say anything without fear that what I say, one sentence of it will now be put on the Federalist website. No, I couldn't have predicted any of that. I mean, I've been writing about racial inequality for 20 years. I just got discovered by a lot of right-wing people with the 1619 Project, and it has both changed my life in good ways and ways that have been very hurtful and distressing.